On March 14, 2009, a storage unit in Bakersfield, California was opened after 11 years of abandonment. The owner had disappeared without a trace in 1998, leaving behind a single item in the otherwise empty concrete room. A porcelain doll. 18 inches tall. Wearing a faded yellow dress with lace trim that had turned the color of old teeth. Its glass eyes were an unnatural shade of green, the kind of green you see in deep water, right before something surfaces. The auction buyer, a man named David Torres, took it home. He thought his daughter would like it. She was 7 years old. That was a mistake. By April 3, exactly 20 days later, David Torres was admitted to St. Agnes Medical Center with a complete psychological breakdown. He kept repeating the same phrase, over and over. It moves when you're not watching. It moves when you're not watching. His daughter hadn't spoken a single word since the doll entered their home. The doll's documented history begins in 1962, though its true origins remain unknown. Margaret Holloway, a widowed seamstress in Portland, Oregon, purchased it from an estate sale on November 12. The previous owner's name had been carefully crossed out in the sales ledger. Margaret brought the doll home to her small apartment on Killingsworth Street. She lived alone. That night, she woke to the sound of humming. A child's voice. Singing a lullaby she didn't recognize. The melody was wrong somehow. The notes bent in ways that made her teeth ache. When she turned on the light, the doll sat upright on her dresser. She was certain, absolutely certain, she had left it in the hallway closet. The next morning, Margaret found scratch marks on her bedroom door. 3 parallel gouges in the wood, exactly the width of a child's fingers. She tried to throw the doll away. Put it in the dumpster behind her building and walked away. But when she returned home that evening, it was sitting on her doorstep. Waiting. The yellow dress was damp, though it hadn't rained. Over the next 6 weeks, Margaret lost 18 pounds. Her neighbors reported hearing her talking to someone at night. Having conversations. But Margaret lived alone. On December 28, she sold the doll to a young couple at a yard sale for 75 cents. She warned them not to buy it. They laughed. They thought she was joking. Margaret Holloway died 3 days later. Heart failure, the coroner said. But her face, witnesses at the funeral couldn't stop talking about her face. The expression of absolute terror frozen in her features. James and Carol Patterson bought the doll for their daughter Emily in late December 1962. They were newlyweds, living in Salem, Oregon, trying to start their life together. Emily was 4 years old, Carol's daughter from a previous marriage. At first, everything seemed normal. Emily played with the doll constantly. Gave it a name. Annabelle. She would have tea parties, one-sided conversations, the usual childhood games. But then the whispering started. Carol would walk past Emily's room and hear 2 voices. Emily's high-pitched child's voice, and something else. Something lower. Raspier. Like gravel scraping against glass. When she opened the door, Emily would be alone with the doll. Annabelle was just telling me a secret, Emily would say. About the bad things that are going to happen. James didn't believe his wife's concerns. Not until the night of February 9, 1963. He woke at 3:17 a.m. to find the doll sitting on his chest. Its weight was impossible. Far heavier than porcelain and cloth should be. The green glass eyes reflected his bedside lamp, and in that reflection, he saw something moving inside them. Something that writhed and twisted like smoke. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The doll's head turned, slowly, with a grinding sound like breaking bones. And then it smiled. Porcelain doesn't move. Porcelain doesn't have muscles or tendons. But James Patterson swears, to this day, that he saw that doll smile. They abandoned the house on February 11, left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, photographs. Everything except Emily. The doll remained, sitting in the empty nursery. The house stayed vacant for 8 months. 3 different families tried to move in. None lasted more than 2 weeks. In October 1963, an antiques dealer named Robert Vance acquired the contents of the Patterson House in an estate liquidation. Robert specialized in vintage dolls. He had over 300 in his collection, displayed in glass cases throughout his Victorian home in Eugene, Oregon. He knew quality when he saw it. The porcelain work on this particular doll was exquisite. Flawless, even. The craftsmanship suggested European origin, possibly French, from the late 1800s. But there were no maker's marks. No stamps or signatures. Just smooth, cold porcelain where identification should have been. Robert placed the doll in his main display room, in a case with 12 other antique dolls. That night, he heard glass breaking. When he rushed downstairs, the case was shattered from the inside. 12 dolls lay on the floor, their porcelain faces cracked and broken. Limbs torn from bodies. Stuffing pulled out like entrails. Only one doll remained intact. The one in the yellow dress. It stood in the center of the carnage. Robert began having the dreams that same night. He was underwater, drowning in darkness. Small hands pressed against his face, pushing him deeper. He could see their eyes glowing in the deep. Dozens of eyes. Hundreds. All watching him sink. He woke gasping, his sheets soaked with cold water that smelled like pond scum and rot. The dreams came every night. His health deteriorated rapidly. His colleagues noticed his hands shaking, his eyes bloodshot and vacant. By December, Robert Vance weighed 132 pounds. He had weighed 190 in October. On December 19, he brought the doll to St. Mary's Catholic Church on Pearl Street. He begged Father Michael Corrigan to perform an exorcism. To burn it. To do anything. Father Corrigan refused. "It's just a doll," he said. Robert left it on the church steps and drove away. The next morning, it was back in his display room. Robert Vance burned his house down on January 3, 1964. He poured gasoline through every room, struck a match, and watched it burn from across the street. Firefighters arrived within minutes, but the Victorian home was already engulfed. The fire burned so hot that the windows melted. The temperature inside reached over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing organic could survive that heat. Nothing. Robert stood there watching until dawn, making sure every timber collapsed into ash. The fire inspector found something strange in the ruins. In what had been the main display room, surrounded by melted glass and charred wood, they found a doll. Intact. Completely untouched by the flames. The yellow dress wasn't even singed. The porcelain showed no cracks, no heat damage. It should have been impossible. The inspector, a man named Carl Brennan, took the doll as evidence of possible arson. It sat in the evidence room of the Eugene Police Department for 7 weeks. During that time, 4 officers reported seeing a little girl in a yellow dress walking the halls at night. Security footage showed nothing. But the reports continued. The doll disappeared from evidence on February 20, 1964. No one signed it out. No record of its removal existed. It simply vanished from a locked room with only 2 keys, both accounted for. Carl Brennan quit the police force 3 days later. He moved to Alaska and never spoke about the case again. But if you found him, if you asked him about that doll, his hands would start shaking. His eyes would go distant. And he would tell you the same thing he told his wife the night before he quit. It's not just a doll. It's a door. And something is trying to come through. Between 1964 and 2009, the doll surfaced 6 more times. Each appearance documented. Each family destroyed. In 1971, the Hernandez family in Sacramento. 3 months of ownership. The father, Miguel, drove his car into a river. His suicide note mentioned the girl in yellow who visits at night. His wife Maria was institutionalized. Their son disappeared and was never found. In 1978, the Chen family in San Francisco bought it at a flea market. Mrs. Chen started speaking in a language her family didn't recognize. Guttural, ancient sounds that made their ears bleed. She died during an attempted exorcism, her last words spoken in that unknown tongue. In 1985, Stephen and Rachel Morrison in Seattle. Their daughter fell into a coma after 3 weeks with the doll. She remained unresponsive for 14 years, until 1999, when she suddenly woke up screaming about the others inside the doll, trying to get out. In 1993, the Kowalski family in Olympia. Their house was found abandoned, food still on the table, car still in the driveway. They were never seen again. In 1998, Thomas Richardson, the storage unit owner from Bakersfield, bought it at an estate sale. He locked it away and disappeared 3 months later. His storage unit remained sealed until 2009. Until David Torres opened it. Each family experienced the same phenomena. The humming at night. The impossible movement. The weight of something pressing down in the darkness. The dreams of drowning. And always, the doll remained pristine. Untouched by time or damage. Its green eyes bright and aware. Watching. Waiting. David Torres never fully recovered from his 20 days with the doll. He lives in a supervised care facility now, medicated around the clock. But on certain nights, when the moon is dark, he becomes agitated. He presses his face against the window and stares at the parking lot. "It's out there," he whispers. Looking for its next home. His daughter finally spoke again, 3 years after the doll was removed from their house. She only said one sentence before falling silent once more. Annabelle says she's not finished yet. She says there are 3 families left. 3 families. The doll was last seen in November 2019, listed on an online auction site. The listing was removed after 6 hours. No explanation given. The seller's account was deleted. But somewhere, right now, in someone's home, that doll in the yellow dress sits waiting. And if you hear humming in the night, if you wake to find something sitting on your chest, pressing down with impossible weight, you'll know. You'll know you're number 8.